J.C. Dugard, Elizabeth Smart, Sean Hornbeck, young people who went missing, kidnapped, but eventually found alive, sometimes years later.
That made us wonder about a little girl who seemingly vanished from Milwaukee.
Today's video topic is not going to be easy to hear, but I wanted to talk about this because I think this brings up an even greater issue when it comes to the media and its coverage of missing black girls as opposed to white girls. And it's really important that this gets discussed because whether we want to admit it or not, the media plays a huge role in how news gets across and how we respond to it and how even cases can get solved because of it. So it's just very sad that we live in a world where certain types of people are viewed as worth saving more than others. And I'm going to get into more of that kind of disposability ideology that's kind of been there for a while. So what I'm talking about here is an abduction case of a young black girl, and it's still considered a cold case. Many may not even know about this case because there isn't nearly as much coverage on it as there is about other abduction cases that were going on at the time. And we'll get into specifically which one, a specific abduction case that ultimately does reveal what exactly I'm talking about as far as racial bias in the media coverage. But today we're going to talk about a missing girl, a missing black girl, and because it's now still unsolved, we don't know really what exactly happened to her or if she is still alive, if she's dead, but she's still a missing black girl. And like I said, there is not nearly as much media coverage. I am talking about Alexis Patterson, and she went missing at 7 years old. This case, like I said, some of you may have heard about it, some of you haven't, but I'm going to go over every piece of information that we have about the case and why this case I think is really important in context of when all of this happened. So Alexis Patterson was born on April 4th, 1995 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the daughter of parents Ayanna Patterson and Kenya Campbell. She was known for being bubbly and having a bossy personality, a lover of roller skating in the color pink, and she was often referred to nicknames such as Lexi and Pie. In 2002, Alexis was living in Milwaukee with her mother, her then stepfather Laurent Bourgeois, and her 6-month-old sister, Disani. The family was said to be very close, and they lived on 49th Street and Garfield Avenue. The residence was located just a half block from Highmount Boulevard School, where Alexis was in the 1st grade, and said to have had a perfect attendance record. Fast forward to January 2002. Alexis's father, Kenya, was charged with misdemeanor battery and misdemeanor bail jumping, charges that would later be dismissed in May of that year. He was released shortly afterwards, and he cooperated with authorities when Alexis went missing. Only 2 months later, Kenya was charged again with repeatedly driving with a revoked license and was imprisoned. On May 1st, 2002, the city of Milwaukee filed a civil suit against him, seeking $7,500 in damages for what they said was negligent operation of a motor vehicle. Some sources say Kenya had posted a $100 bond in relation to the charge just 2 days before his daughter went missing. However, Kenya was released May 6th, which rules him out as a suspect of the disappearance. Alexis' stepfather also has a criminal history as well, but investigators announced that they did not believe either Laurent or Kenya were connected to her case. So now we're finally at May 3rd, 2002. It was already a really difficult morning for Alexis Patterson. She was in a fit of crying because she could not take the cupcakes that she had been promised she could for snack day at her school. She had these picked out for her friends and she really wanted to show them to her. However, because Alexis didn't do her homework the night before, her mom said no about the cupcakes and she would not budge on the issue. The thing is, Alexis usually finished all of her school assignments on time, but there had been some concern on the part of her parents over the quality of her work in those recent days up to her disappearance. Like most kids, she didn't always pay close attention to directions, and her parents wanted to make sure to correct this issue before it got more out of control, which that makes sense. They wanted to make sure that she was doing her assignments and actually understanding the curriculum. Since she wasn't used to getting punished, her mom's refusal to allow her to bring the snack to school that day really upset Alexis. And some believe that this might have been the catalyst for her maybe possibly running away out of rebellion for not being able to bring the snack to school. Alexis kept trying to beg her mom, but her mother would not allow it. So Alexis ended up going to school really upset without her cupcakes that day. Alexis attended High Mount Community School in Milwaukee, which was just a one-block walk to her school from where she lived. She was still visibly upset about the cupcakes walking with her stepfather to the crosswalk that morning, and she was still crying as she joined her fellow students on the playground, as numerous kids would remember seeing her that Friday morning, but she never showed up for class. It's also weird because this school that Alexis attended had a policy of only calling parents if a student was absent for 2 days in a row. So Ayanna and LaRon had no idea Alexis wasn't even in school. When she failed to come home at her normal time, they weren't overly concerned. They assumed that she was probably just still angry about the cupcakes and was just acting out a little bit and delaying her return home. After waiting for more than an hour for Alexis to walk to the door, Ayanna called the school to see if she was still there. She was really surprised and concerned when she found out that she wasn't even in school all day. Like any rational and normal parent, she immediately called the police, but they didn't even know where to start because, according to LaRon, he let her off at the crosswalk and she went to the school normally like she usually did. It's also important to mention, at the time, Milwaukee actually didn't have like an Amber Alert system set up yet, so there wasn't any like immediate Amber Alert put out for Alexis. It actually wouldn't be until a year later when they actually developed an Amber Alert system in Milwaukee. When officers arrived, LaRon had told them that he had seen Alexis at 8 a.m. when he walked her to the crosswalk. He left as the crossing guard escorted Alexis across the street and the entrance to the schoolyard. Ayanna explained that Alexis had been upset that morning and she believed that maybe she might have tried to run away from home as a result. She had never skipped school before, so she didn't know if that could be a possibility or not, and that's why they really had no idea where to start. Police began their investigation on the assumption that Alexis had made a conscious decision to skip school. It seemed probable that Alexis wasn't actually missing or lost, but hiding from her parents. This was supported by the fact that several different students recalled seeing Alexis on the playground, both before school and after school, though no one had seen her inside the building. Friends said that she had been crying when they saw her after school, but no one knew where she might be or have gone at that point. There's no real time frame to say when Alexis went missing because we have reports from the school saying that she wasn't there all day, but we have reports from kids saying that she had been seen after school. There's really a confusion in when Alexis went missing. So naturally, the police started their search at High Mount Community School. Alexis S. Patterson was seen wearing a red hooded jacket with a gray stripe on the sleeves, a purple shirt, light-colored blue jeans, and white Nike tennis shoes. She wore her hair in 2 braids pulled back into 1 ponytail and was carrying a pink Barbie book bag. She has black hair and brown eyes. At the time of her disappearance, she was 3 feet 4 inches tall and weighed 42 pounds. She had a lump on her left pinky finger and a scar under her right eye, and wearing earrings shaped like sunflowers. In the end, the police found nothing to indicate that Alexis had remained on school property. They checked with classmates, friends, and neighbors, and they were able to rule out the possibility that she was hiding out in someone's home. Concern grew as hours went by without any sign of her, and the search area was expanded. Dozens of officers worked throughout the night, checking in trash cans and down alleys. By dawn, they began to worry that Alexis might have been the victim of foul play. 2 weeks before Alexis went missing, an unknown male tried to abduct a small boy near High Mount Community School. The school administration sent a letter to the parents of all the students warning them of the attempted abduction. After reading the letter, Ayanna had reminded Alexis that she was to never talk to strangers. The following week, though, Alexis had been seen talking to an unknown woman near her school, and her mother repeated her warning about strangers. Alexis was a friendly girl, though, and her mother's warnings failed to leave a lasting impression. 2 days before her daughter went missing, she was seen talking with the same woman again, and now Ayanna worried that this woman might have something to do with her daughter's disappearance. It scared the shit out of me me, she said, recalling how she lectured her daughter after both incidents. Ayanna and Laron had missing person flyers printed up and spent the entire weekend hanging them on every telephone pole, tree, and store window in the area. Volunteer search teams spread out across the neighborhood. They were looking for Alexis and making sure all residents were aware that the child was missing. Ayanna made a public plea for her daughter's return, saying that she could forgive whoever took Alexis if she just brought her back to her family.
Her mother, Ayanna, pleaded for her return.
Mommy wants you home. I want my baby.
The search effort intensified on Monday. The Milwaukee Police Department reached out to the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office for help, and deputies were sent to assist in the search. A mobile command unit was set up in Milwaukee's Washington Park, 10 blocks away from where Alexis was last seen. Teams worked around the clock using helicopters and horses to increase the amount of ground they could cover. Police divers scoured the Washington Park Lagoon, while volunteer searchers helped police comb through the area between Highmount Community School and Washington Park. They found nothing related to Alexis. While the physical search for Alexis was going on, detectives continued their investigation behind the scenes. As more time passed, foul play seemed more likely. As in all missing person investigations, detectives started by interviewing family members. On Tuesday, Laron and Ayanna underwent an intense 10-hour interrogation. At the time of Alexis's disappearance, the police focused heavily on Patterson and her ex-husband. The police questioned Bourgeois extensively due to his criminal history and his failed polygraph. Still, Bourgeois always cooperated with the police. Laron criticized detectives for focusing more on them than on finding Alexis, and detectives responded by giving polygraph examinations to both of them. Ayanna passed hers without any problems, but Laron was determined to be deceptive when asked if he knew about the whereabouts of Alexis. He continued to maintain that he had no idea what happened to the girl, and he left her with the crossing guard. He would remain under a cloud of suspicion for most of the investigation, though police admitted that there were witnesses who saw Alexis long after Laron had returned to home that morning. Several students at Highmount Community School had told the police that they had seen a red SUV with dark-tinted windows idling in the area around the school several times the previous week, including on the day Alexis disappeared. None of the students recognized it, as it doesn't belong to anyone at the school, and it hadn't been seen since Alexis went missing. The truck never dropped anyone off or picked anyone up, and it disappeared after Alexis vanished. Police made a note of the sighting, but were never able to positively link the SUV to Alexis. The television show America's Most Wanted profiled the disappearance on May 11th, bringing some much-needed publicity to the case. Several new leads came in as a result, and detectives followed up on each one. Unfortunately, each one led to a dead end. On May 13th, police announced that the disappearance of Alexis was being reclassified from a missing person investigation to a criminal investigation. They noted that the circumstances surrounding the disappearance were suspicious, but they had no suspects or persons of interest. Alexis's case would dominate the local news for the next month. No real progress was made on the case. Detectives followed up on several potential sightings of Alexis, but none of them led to the missing girl. A few weeks after Alexis disappeared, someone put up offensive flyers asking why the white community should care if a black child was missing. Some were taped to the front of America's Black Holocaust Museum, others were placed on car windshields and in shop windows on the east side of Milwaukee. Public outcry over the incident led to the arrest of 22-year-old Brian Werner. Jesse Leonard, the museum's executive director, said a staff member found a note glued to the front door right before the museum opened to the public. The note had been typed on a computer, asking why any white person would care about the disappearance of a black child. The note said, "If black people think white people should be concerned about Alexis, you are dreadfully mistaken." The museum, of course, was saddened and disturbed by the discovery and took the note down immediately, but this made it even worse for Ayanna going forward. She started receiving harassment, and the police even refused to disclose the letter to the public because of all the harassment that she was getting. There's even a picture of someone crossing out the phone number because they didn't want them to receive any more harassing phone calls, because they started receiving sexually explicit phone calls and racially bigoted phone calls as well from people after this letter started going around. We clearly see that race does play a huge role in this, and people that argue that it doesn't really need to reevaluate the situation and see where this is coming from. Because if this were a white child, and we've seen this many times where it is a white child, they don't have to face this scrutiny because white children are viewed as valuable and worthy compared to black children. He was eventually released without charges. The deputy district attorney explained that as offensive as the flyers were, bringing charges would be against Werner's First Amendment rights. It wouldn't be the last time the issue of race would come up in relation to this case. Werner did get off really easy for this, and even though he didn't commit any actual physical crime, he still put up these flyers that unconsciously would go into the minds of people that would read them and then think it's okay to not care about a child if it's a child of color that's missing, but everybody should care if it's a white child that goes missing. On June 3rd, 2002, about 75 people came together to hold a candlelight vigil for the 1-month anniversary of Alexis's disappearance. They gathered on the front steps of Hyman Community School and prayed for the safe return of the missing first grader. Ayana was optimistic that her daughter was still alive and urged the community to keep looking for her. 2 days after the candlelit vigil, the issue of racism would emerge once again. On June 5th, 14-year-old Elizabeth Smart was abducted from her home in Utah. Soon, many would start to notice a trend when it came to national attention of kidnapping cases. Why is the media giving so much attention to a kidnapped white girl in Utah when Milwaukee has an equally horrible situation involving a missing black girl? Beverly Williams, a Milwaukee NAACP leader involved in the effort to find Alexis, said, "On radio talk shows, people are saying, who is this white girl getting all this coverage? The national media has been heavily criticized. People are saying the media is somewhat racist and one-sided." Alexis's disappearance on May 3rd raised questions about what exactly makes a story enticing to the national media. Is the disappearance of a middle-class white girl more significant than kidnapping of a black girl from a poor neighborhood? Beverly said it has been extremely frustrating trying to get national attention. When trying to raise national attention about Alexis's case, Williams said that it has been particularly frustrating to get people to call her back. "I have a notebook full of numbers, people who I have called. People say, I'll make sure our editor gets this, and then nothing happens. Both children are helpless," said Williams. "All missing children are important." And that's really what the emphasis here is. At the end of the day, these are children missing, and race really shouldn't play a part in this. And for some reason, the national news media, they love it when an innocent white, pure girl goes missing, but when a black girl goes missing, it's just expected, so it's not as much to raise attention about, which is really sad. The media attention was strong at first when looking for Alexis, but over time it just started to dwindle and the interest just gave out. The local press interest was still strong, but the case has largely been a non-starter with the national media. However, we know that the Elizabeth Smart case was immediately taken in by the media and covered completely all the time compared to Alexis. And when a white girl goes missing from her $1 million Salt Lake City home, that starts to turn heads apparently more than when a black girl goes missing in her poor black neighborhood. Because when a white girl is disrupted from her normal life, it's somehow a bigger devastation than when a black girl is disrupted from her normal life, especially if the white girl comes from an upper class family. It just becomes more, poor girl, it's so sad that such an innocent child had to be put through this. But a lot of innocent black children are put through this, trafficked even, and people either don't care or don't even bring attention to that at all. Like I said, the media completely was absorbed in Elizabeth's case way more than Alexis's case. The circumstances of Elizabeth's apparent abduction were disturbing and dramatic. She was reportedly taken from the bedroom of her home in the dead of night by a well-dressed, soft-spoken man who brandished a small gun. But Alexis's fate was also a parent's worst nightmare. An innocent little girl apparently kidnapped while walking to school, especially when her school is only a block away. It's so bizarre. are. While race and class undoubtedly play a role in media coverage of such cases, other factors also contribute to the scope and intensity of the coverage. Sympathy for the family and a feeling that the parents were blameless in the child's disappearance is a key factor for media attention to a story. They really want to focus on if the parent was just an innocent parent that took care of their child and was great, and how could this happen out of nowhere, especially if their life was so normal. That's what the media really loves about it. They love to make it such a dramatized story. And in both cases with Elizabeth and with Alexis's parents, there is no evidence to suggest that either set of parents played any role in the disappearance of their children. And Elizabeth's parents have emerged as innocent victims in the media accounts. However, like we said before, Alexis's parents were interrogated a lot more about their back history. So it just goes to show how people are viewed, and especially when they're viewed as suspects, especially how even just the color of your skin can really impact how something is investigated. LaRon was constantly investigated for his criminal record that includes serving as the gateway driver in a bank robbery that resulted in the killing of a police officer. They were focused on that. So it kind of shows where the priorities were for the police in that. Not saying that to excuse LaRon's crime at all, but that crime really isn't relevant with trying to find Alexis. So the police shouldn't have been so insistent on that part of it. Gail McBride, a missing children's liaison in Phoenix, Arizona, says in her experience, the media tends to be attached to cases that indicate a potential stranger abduction type situation. It's going to pique people's interests. Someone coming to your home and abducting your kid while you're sleeping, that could happen to any of us, said McBride. She notes that the public is less involved in the case if they feel there was some lapse in the parent's care of the child, which really is really messed up, that the child, which has nothing to do with the matter, whether the parents were good to them or not, should affect whether they get found or how much involvement goes into it. That's just so wrong to me, that would really impact someone trying to find a missing child. I haven't seen a problem connected to race, said McBride. In Arizona, we have a huge Hispanic population, and we've had Hispanic kids go missing, and the media goes all out. I'm not saying that to dispute her experience, because of course she's a police officer and she has the knowledge of all that, but to say that there isn't a race problem connected is very naive thinking. And she didn't bring up black children specifically, so that's just making me even more suspicious. We're talking about black children that are going missing, and you didn't even bring them up when you said that you don't see that there's a problem connected to race. So clearly, do you just not recognize them as missing people at all? I don't know if this may have been unconscious, but the fact that she didn't bring up black children as well as Hispanic children as well as Asian children, just basically children of any race or ethnicity, is just problematic to me anyway, because we're talking about a missing black girl and then you bring up Hispanic people. Why wouldn't you bring up other cases of black children to further your point? Bob Steele, a journalism ethics expert with the Poynter Institute, a journalism training organization in St. Petersburg, Florida, says a variety of factors determine which stories the media covers. According to the Poynter website, Steele cites several factors that determine the publicity that a missing person case might get in the media. Whether it's a slow or busy news day, whether media outlets are competing with each other to break news elements of the case, the extent of cooperation of the police department, the aggressiveness of the parents in giving interviews, providing photos, working with the media deadlines, whether there are unusual elements to the case. Steele concludes that race and class are unavoidable factors in the journalism decision. A look at the demographics of American news organizations tell us that the majority of journalists are white, and while socioeconomic statistics are harder to come by, it's safe to say that the majority of journalists are at least middle class, he said in his article. Compare those factors, race and class, to the communities the journalists cover, and you will find a disconnect in many cases. This makes sense. A lot of people people from middle class are going to understand the middle class and going to investigate the middle class. Not saying that it's right. I'm not saying that even that's what happens all the time. But what I'm saying is we see that frequently that's what happens more because that's what's understood. We see that it happens more because also cases where people who seemingly live this somewhat normal American life being disrupted and chaotic, that's the type of drama that the news likes to sensationalize as well. And people who tend to live in poverty and live in lower socioeconomic status, they're already living with struggles. So reporting on that type of thing would be kind of redundant, apparently. Not saying that is right, because a lot of people in these circumstances who are poor, who live in poverty, also struggle on daily basis with a lot of things that are completely unimaginable to those who live in a higher upper class and who are also white and don't have to worry about the impacts of race or class at all. But at the same time, the news likes to sensationalize that type of lifestyle. They don't really go after like the low poverty neighborhoods and dig like deep stories out of there. Unless something really bizarre happens that's unique, they're not gonna look for that. They're gonna look for stuff that they know and stuff that will capture people's attention, which is, like I said, someone's normal life going upside down, like a child being abducted from their home in the middle of the night by a stranger in a middle class, seemingly normal American home life. How does this happen? People are more concerned than someone who lives significantly lower income, and especially if they're not white. Like I said, there's an expectation that black girls just go missing, that black girls just run away, and that's normal. So the media is not going to go searching for something that's an expectation. They're going to be searching for stuff that's out of the ordinary. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, we just expect that missing black girls are the ordinary, and that missing white girls, specifically missing white girls from middle class, normal families going missing, that's where the priority seems to be. And that's really unfortunate, because a lot of people who have less resources and can't protect themselves, and a lot of people who still go through these struggles of losing their children, don't get the same type of support from the police or from their community, even because of just the color of their skin or how much money they have in their pocket or how they raise their children. It's just all these factors that really should not play a role in whether we look for a missing child or a missing person. Seems to mean the world to the media and how they spin the story, because just a missing person isn't enough for the media. They need to have some type of drama, some type of sad story that they can manipulate to the public. Beverly Williams of the Milwaukee NAACP said that she learned every day about how the media worked. And in the more recent days of the case, it finally got the attention from the national news, the organizations like CBS, CNN, and the Washington Post. But Williams said that she is troubled by a feeling that there isn't the same interest in a missing black girl from a poor neighborhood. There seems to be something going on, be it bias, racial preference. The information is not getting out to the appropriate people, she said. I don't know who was in charge of getting national attention to a story. Maybe Elizabeth Smart's family had a good PR department, I don't know. But that's problematic as well, because not everybody has a PR department. Not everybody can afford that. What about the parents that can't? Do they just not get to find their children because they couldn't afford that? That's so wrong. We live in a society of systemic racism where black people are literally systemically put down at a lower socioeconomic status so white people can still hold a position of power over black people. Really, the reality of the situation is that an estimated 64,000 to 75,000 black women and girls are currently missing in the US. There are also distinct barriers for black families reporting missing loved ones. Widespread mistrust of law enforcement. I wonder why black people would have mistrust of the police. The police are supposed to save us. Why would we be afraid of the police? There's no reason for that. So that could be one issue issue. Another thing is also the disparate ways law enforcement treat disappearances and how law enforcement may also not focus as heavily on missing black girls as they would for a missing white girl. Unfortunately, it is common for police to shrug a shoulder to a missing black girl because black people have been viewed as commodities, and it may be racial bias that contributes to how much police officers are involved. The bias can be conscious or completely unconscious, which is very scary as well because that means law enforcement have unconsciously internalized that black people are less, and in turn a missing black person isn't going to be met with the same concern or determination for a solution as a missing white person. The complexity of the situation too also adds to it. Black women and girls exist at the intersection of racism and sexism, and quite often poverty as well. These barriers contribute to constantly create these poor outcomes in many arenas, including but not limited to health, wealth, housing, education, employment, food, security, access to water, and violence. So much more than what I just listed, but I could be here all day. It is therefore unsurprising that black women and girls would be overrepresented among people missing in the US. They are uniquely vulnerable because of all of these situations that intersect against them, and too easily erased from public discussions about the alarming trend of missing people because this is just so normally accepted. Black girls may be lured or forced into dangerous situations. Homeless black girls, whether in shelters or on the streets, as well as those in foster care, are targets for sex trafficking and other forms of violence. Again, like I mentioned, black people are often more seen as commodities as well. Even in modern day, we think that this ideology is over, but it's so unconsciously ingrained into our society that it still happens under our noses and we act like it doesn't. Although some black girls do reside in loving and supporting foster homes, quite often black girls without stable living situations run away from their homes or shelters and unknowingly enter into even riskier circumstances than they were before. African American girls comprise over 40% of domestic sex trafficking victims in the US alone. While running away from physical and or sexual abuse or economic deprivation, black girls run into sexual predators preying on their vulnerabilities. Let's remember also, because black girls that are missing are less likely to be reported, that means that these people, specifically these men that target these vulnerable girls, are specifically capitalizing on the fact that there isn't public outcry for them in the first place. Runaways don't get Amber Alerts, as those are reserved for abductees. No texts or sirens go out when these girls go missing. Quite often, law enforcement categorize missing black girls as runaways anyway, so they automatically just see them as runaways even if they're missing. Consequently, their cases aren't treated with the urgency given to those of people who have been abducted. They disappear into a faceless mass of missing children, blamed for their attempt to escape untenable situations. Systemic failures render black girls runaways invisible and, more harrowingly, disposable. In the end, their stories remain untold or unfairly chronicled as tales of juvenile delinquency and criminality. Black girls aren't afforded the protection of childhood innocence. White children are seen as automatically innocent, where black children seem to either have to earn their innocence or just aren't seen that way at all, which is why we see situations where 11-year-old black boys are being put in the back of police cars like they're adults. It is also common for people to see black children as adults way younger than they should be seen as adults compared to white children, and because black girls tend to have, more developing features earlier on, that can also add to why people see black people, specifically black children, as adults when they're not. They're still innocent children and have to grow up way faster than white children. And black women also fare much worse terms than not getting the public outcry that they need. For example, when news broke last year of an interstate sex trafficking ring in Georgia and Louisiana, some within media and law enforcement emphasized the victims' complicity and consensual participation in sex trade. The victims were black women and girls, although the traffickers and those who aided them eventually faced legal recourse. The victims received very little attention. These black women and girls remained unnamed, disposable people in a sensationalized story about sex trafficking. So it is clear that race plays a huge huge part in whether media covers a missing persons case, in whether police actually get involved in a person's case, whether the victims even feel safe enough to go to the police to get help about a missing person. So we see that race and socioeconomic status play a huge role. Alexis and Elizabeth's cases really do show how the media responds to a case. With Elizabeth, we see that the news and the media respond right away, and with Alexis, it was hard for PR to even get anything that would help them get a lead on the case at all. They couldn't even get any spots on any talk shows. Because of the stark differences in the way that media actually covered both cases, people started to discuss about race and how it actually plays a part. Ironically, though, with all this uproar created by the disparity between the two cases, no one was getting anywhere with Alexis. Where was she? Why was no one getting involved in this case the way they should be? 5 weeks after Alexis went missing, police dismantled the mobile command unit that had been set up in Washington Park. They stressed that they were still actively investigating the case, but the number of new tips coming in had decreased, and they no longer had needed the help of the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office to manage the workload. In August of that year, an anonymous caller told a Milwaukee television station that Alexis's body would be found in a certain section of the Milwaukee River. A police dive team was sent into the river to investigate, but found nothing to substantiate the information. Shortly before the 1-year anniversary of Alexis's disappearance, LaRon was arrested and charged with disorderly conduct while armed and battery after he threatened Ayanna with a knife and told her he would kill her. She told the police he had beaten her in a jealous rage after received a page from an unknown number. He was eventually convicted and Ayanna filed for divorce. I believe they could have done a better job with her case, she said of the Milwaukee Police. Along with police scrutiny, Patterson dealt with a prayerful and at times cruel public. It was pure hell, she said, and a lot of confusion at the time. She also said local media became overwhelming. I had no peace at all, she said. However, she kept giving interviews, speaking to politicians and raising awareness about Alexis's disappearance because, as she said, that's my baby. There's nothing you won't do for your baby.
Yes, I can. A mother that lost her child, a mother that loses a child, and she buried her child. She's at peace, and her child is at peace because she knows where her child is. The difference is between Alexis, the not knowing, I don't know where my child is, so that's what hurts the most. I need peace. So if her body is somewhere cold, I'd rather have her body so I can be at peace, so we can have some closure. There's a big difference because when a mother loses a child and her child is deceased and she can bury that child, she knows where that child is. I'm always hurting. I'm always in pain because I need to know. I need closure. And I'm kind of jealous of mothers that lose their children. Not like in a bad way, but you know, they have peace. And that's something that I just don't have right now at this point. So I'm going to continue to pray and keep my faith. And I'm going to make sure that I stay honest and stay faithful and true to God.
Thanks to her diligence, the case has been featured on The View, Find Our Missing, Maury Povich, Ricky Lake, Crime Watch Daily, America's Most Wanted, and The Pursuit. Ayanna was finally glad to be getting the attention for her daughter's case. It's just really unfortunate that it took longer than it could have if the media showed more interest in Alexis's case, but it is great that she did end up being able to get it out there on those national TV stations and show to be able to let people know that her daughter's missing and that she's still looking for her. Like I mentioned in the beginning, Wisconsin did end up adopting an Amber Alert system, but it was nearly a year after Alexis's disappearance on April 30th, 2003. Since then, numerous tips on her whereabouts have come in over the years, including ones in states as far as Louisiana and, most recently, from Bryan, Ohio. As time went on, the case lost momentum. Detectives continue to investigate possible sightings of Alexis, some as far away as California, but never got any closer to finding her. They admitted that the likelihood of finding her alive decreased with each passing day, but they hadn't found anything to indicate that she was dead. Alexis literally disappeared without a trace. Over the years, detectives have followed up on hundreds of possible leads. When a convicted prisoner claimed that Alexis had been killed and buried outside of Baton Rouge city limits, 3 detectives flew to Louisiana to investigate. They found nothing. In December 2013, Kenya was charged with beating his 8-month-old daughter. He was charged with 3 counts of felony child abuse and 1 count of child neglect. According to Kenya, he had woken up his mother at 5 a.m. on November 22, 2013, and told her that the baby had fallen off couch. While she had gotten a split lip as a result of the fall, she was otherwise fine. He said that he had left for work, leaving his mother to care for the infant. This had become more than a split lip. Seeing how injured she really was, Kenya's mother brought her to the Children's Hospital of Wisconsin, where a CT scan and physical examination were conducted. Through these tests, it was determined that she had suffered abusive head trauma, a broken jaw, a fractured rib, a lacerated liver, and an adrenal hemorrhage, and bruises to her face, abdomen, and chest. According to the doctor, the trauma was consistent with severe child abuse, and the police were dispatched.
It should be noted that Kenya Campbell, according to prosecutors, went to work after telling his mother that the baby had fallen. Now he's behind bars where he could spend the rest of his life if he's convicted. The man faces a bevy of child abuse charges. Live in downtown Milwaukee, Cody Holyoke, today's TMJ4.
Well, certainly a horrendous situation. Now, let me ask you, though, Cody, a question that maybe a lot of viewers are thinking right now. Given the allegations against Campbell, what do we know about the case with Alexis and where he was? I'm told at that point, when she disappeared, he was not a suspect.
And from what we can tell from Milwaukee Police, that still remains true, Charles. There's no indication that Mr. Campbell had anything to do with Alexis's disappearance.
When questioned, Kenya's mother initially said that the baby had been sleeping on her back in the living room before falling off the couch after Kenya had already left for work at 5. She had entered the living room after hearing crying, where she'd found the infant bleeding from her mouth and with her left eye deviated, as if she were having a seizure. This story was eventually changed to say that Kenya had woken her up to report the fall. Kenya's story changed and had several inconsistencies. He also told the police he had returned home with his daughter around 3 p.m. on November 21, 2013, with no signs of injury, after which he was her sole caretaker until 5 p.m. Upon him leaving for work the next morning, she had been asleep on the couch. His mother had tried to call him at 7 a.m., but he didn't answer. This call has never been proven, as Kenya had deleted the call history on his cell phone. Kenya pleaded not guilty to all 4 charges against him. In 2016, investigators received information from a man named Joshua Miller of Bryan, Ohio, who believed his ex-wife to be Alexis. The pair had gotten married in 2009, before divorcing 4 years later. At the time Joshua's theory came to light, the pair were in the midst of a custody battle over their son. According to Joshua, there were aspects of his wife's past that didn't add up, like she couldn't remember her childhood prior to being 10 years old. As he began to dig into her past, he came across Alexis's missing persons flyer, where he discovered she and his ex-wife had similar birthmark in the same place. Joshua's suspicions were also shared by his fiancée, and the pair were struck by his ex-wife's resemblance to the age-progressed images of Alexis. Hoping to confirm his suspicions, Joshua traveled to Milwaukee with his son to meet Ayanna. Whilst there, he gave a sample of his son's DNA to Ayanna, as the police department in Bryan had already collected a saliva sample from his ex-wife. This sample, along with any files the Bryan Police Department had collected, were then mailed to the Milwaukee Police. Senator Lena Taylor caught wind of this theory during this time, and she'd been helping the Patterson family in their search for Alexis. She too was certain Joshua's ex-wife was the missing girl after seeing the pair's wedding photo. After Ayanna reached out to her, she got in contact with the local sheriff's office, who sent officers to Ohio. Police thoroughly examined this potential lead when officials in Bryan met with Joshua's ex-wife. She was able to provide them with numerous documents to prove that she said she was who she was, including a birth certificate that showed she was born in Belize, her green card, and her passport. She was also able to provide the pair's divorce documents. This raised doubts in the theory, which were only further raised upon learning that the ex-wife was actually 7 years older than Alexis, and she already had 2 children. If it were Alexis, then that meant that she would have had to given birth and marry Joshua at an unusually young age, as she would have been only 14 years old at the time. When the DNA results came back from Wisconsin Regional Crime Lab, it was determined the 2 samples didn't match, meaning Joshua's ex-wife was not Alexis. Ayanna questioned the results upon learning about them, saying that the sample they'd used from Alexis could have been corrupted or have come from another source. She demanded investigators perform a new test with her own DNA, but her request was denied. This led to Ayanna hiring a private investigator. Despite the DNA results, Ayanna is of the belief that this woman is her missing daughter. She says that the 2 have the same mole above their left eye toward her nose, which is a common trait amongst those in the immediate family. She also has the same birthmark Joshua noted, as well as the bump on her pinky finger and a scar under her right eye, both of which Alexis has as well. And they said that she also had the flyers from when Alexis was missing, so that was another suspicion and a reason why they thought it could be her. Joshua spent a total of 4 years working to expose the case, sharing that he didn't trust the DNA test as well, and that he was trying to get his ex-wife away from an unnamed man. He still feels she is indeed Alexis, but says she won't admit it because she's afraid of the people she knows to be her current family. He also claims that the FBI and Interpol are investigating something bigger in relation to Alexis' case, but this has not been confirmed by either organization. Joshua's ex-wife has said she felt agitated and angry over the attention she received as a result of the DNA tests, as some who had read about the case online had gathered outside her home, but also shares that she feels sorry for the family. She has fully cooperated with the investigation. Ayanna has said she feels sadness for the woman over the intense media scrutiny.
Today, I got the results on the media. I didn't get a call till after they released it on the media, stating that Lisa is not Alexis. I don't believe that. Absolutely not. And the reason why is because I just gave the MPD my DNA yesterday, okay? And they told me, the lieutenant, I talked to the lieutenant today, he told me that they matched Lisa's DNA with the DNA that they got 14 years ago of Alexis's. Well, first of all, who gave you the DNA 14 years ago? You never received the DNA from me. What DNA did you use? From a toothbrush? Nah. Give me the real DNA. Use my DNA. Put my DNA to Lisa's DNA and take it from there. And if the test come back stating that she's not mine, then that's when I will accept it. But right now, I'm not accepting it because she's too much like me. How does she have the same mole right here that I have, that my daughters have, and her granddaughter, and her daughter have? She has the same birthmark as Alexis had when Alexis was first born. She has the same mark on her eye, the right eye, what my daughter had, okay? She has the same bump, and she has the same mole on her nose right here, too. We're too much alike for this not to be my child. I worry about my daughter every day. I've been worried about my baby for 14 years. You understand? And then now that I finally got a nice, I feel like a solid clue, you know what I'm saying, a solid lead, y'all gonna tell me that it's not her? It hurts. It really hurts. I will continue to search. I will continue to search for her. I would never stop until she come home. I will say to Alexis, I'm sorry for the things that you've gone through. And I've never meant to cause you any pain. I'm just a hurting mother that wants her child. And I believe that you are my daughter. And no matter what the test says, I still believe 1,000,000% that you are my child. And I want you to continue to go on with your life and try to be as happy as you can and be the best mother that you can possibly be and raise your children And don't let no one hurt your kids. Don't let your children out your sight.
Hoping to find anything that would lead to something, investigators looked through local sex offender registries as well as probation and parole files, but were unable to come up with anything. Numerous officers also spent many of their days off searching for Alexis, and were given help by both the FBI and other state law enforcement agencies. For months, volunteers would search the city daily for the missing girl, utilizing K-9 units. They walked down paths and through buildings, searched Miller Park, and looked through all local bodies of water. In January 2003, sources familiar with the investigation shared that John Doe investigation had been launched into her disappearance, but this has never been officially confirmed. Approximately a year after Alexis vanished, Laurent was subjected to a polygraph, which he reportedly failed. The questions he was asked have never been publicly released. In 2004, Kenya was convicted of drug charges. 4 years later, in June 2009, he was also convicted of the manufacture and delivery of cocaine in Portage County, for which he was sentenced to 4 years in prison. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released an age progression photos of Alexis in 2009, which showed what she would have looked like at 14 years old. Another one would be released in 2013, showing what she would have looked like at 17. In 2012, police announced that they re-interviewed 60 to 65 people connected to the case. They even scoured more than 10,000 pages of notes and evidence. Some of those who had been re-interviewed shared that they may not have remembered correctly and that they may not have seen her on that particular Friday morning. Around this time, a relationship was re-established with the Patterson family. It was also announced by Milwaukee Mayor Tom Barrett that May 3rd would be known as Alexis Patterson Forget-Me-Not Day. Hoping those already incarcerated may know something, Milwaukee Police included her image in a pack of cold case playing cards that were then sent to jails and prisons across Wisconsin. In May 2017, a Hear Their Voice celebration was held at the Wisconsin Black Historical Society on West Center Street in honor of Alexis and other missing children from around the world. That same year, Laurent was arrested on charges unrelated to the case and was being held at the Milwaukee Secure Detention Facility. Ayanna has shared that she feels the local authorities could have done a better job handling her daughter's disappearance. Even with her being gone that long, it hurts like hell, Ayanna said, but I've turned my pain into power. The power of her daughter's memory runs through the city of Milwaukee. In 2016, public officials walked through the route Alexis took to school that day and laid a wreath in her honor. There, everyone knows Alexis Patterson's name. As National Missing Children's Day on May 25th approached, Patterson said she is hopeful. There's no way I would allow my daughter to see me as weak, because if she sees me weak, that's going to make her become weak. That's not even in our DNA. I know I'm going to see her soon, she said. I always feel her. Alexis's case has been assigned to the Cold Case Division since 2009, but detectives are optimistic that they will one day get the information needed to discover what happened to her. They are certain someone in the Milwaukee area has the answers they're seeking. Ayanna has never given up on the hope that Alexis is still alive and that will one day be reunited. She remains active in the search of her daughter and refuses to let people forget that Alexis is still missing. The Milwaukee Police County Sheriff's Office is currently offering a $10,000 reward for information leading to Alexis's return. As of 2009, the case has been assigned to the Milwaukee Police Department's Cold Case Unit. There are currently no suspects, but it's said that investigators have not ruled anyone out. Over 5,000 interviews have been conducted, and the effort between the Milwaukee Police Department and the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office was one of the largest joint efforts in both organizations' histories. However, despite the intensive investigation, very little progress has been made in relation to the case, and there have been no physical evidence uncovered to contradict what those interviews have told the police. Laurent Bourgeois died in January 2021 of a drug overdose. His death made headlines in Milwaukee because he had been the last person to see Alexis, and the publicity has renewed interest in the case and generated a few new tips. Although Laurent has been closely looked at, the police eventually believed that he was telling the truth. There have also been a few theories that have come out about Alexis's disappearance over the years, so I thought that I should go over those just to go over everything about this case and what's been said. The primary theory here in the case of Alexis is that her stepfather, Laurent, was somehow involved in her disappearance. Former sheriff of the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office, David Clark, believes Laurent was involved unsolved, but says the authorities haven't been able to prove it with the evidence they've uncovered. He feels that Alexis was never dropped off at school and that she was never seen, but maybe some people have mistaken to see her. A subsection of this theory is that Alexis's disappearance may have been related to prostitution. There have been claims circulated that LaRon worked as a pimp and managed prostitutes. However, nothing has been related to this and publicly proven. LaRon has repeatedly denied any involvement in his stepdaughter's disappearance and has no proof that he was involved. The second theory is a conspiracy theory that states that the town of Bryan, Ohio is made up of missing children who don't know who they really are. It also shares that Ayanna and Joshua know that his ex-wife is really Alexis, but they have been instructed to keep quiet. Those who believe in this theory say that Big Brother is behind many of the child disappearances that have occurred in the United States. A final proposed theory is that there could possibly be a drug connection to Alexis's disappearance. However, very little has been elaborated about that, so we don't really know about this theory. Out of all three of them, honestly, the first one seems the most plausible, just based on the track record of LaRon. And I hate to just go off of criminal history, but the other two just seem so absurd and not possible. I just don't see, especially the second one. I mean, the third one with the drug connection could possibly be it, but I just can't see the second one being a theory at all in this. And it could possibly be the woman that she was seen with by her mother. There are many explanations for this, so we don't really know, and I think that's why a lot of people have come up with so many of these theories, because they just want an answer for what happened to this little girl, and there's just been no answer. They just want closure, I think. So some of these theories might go a step beyond, because they really just want to believe that Alexis is okay and that she will be found, and I understand that, but at the same time, like I said, I just really don't think that the whole town of Bryan just has cases where kids don't know who they are, and that Ayanna and Joshua actually know. I think they'd let the public know after all this time. So in conclusion to this, Ayanna believes Alexis is still alive and continues to celebrate her birthday every year. Kenya has shared that he mourns the loss of his daughter as well. When Alexis was first born, she was the color of sweet potato pie, Ayanna Patterson remembered. That's one of the memories that has come flooding back about her daughter, who loved cheesecake, the color pink, and taking care of her 6-month-old sister. When I eat Mexican food, I always think of her, Patterson said with a smile, describing Alexis as a little girl with a bubbly and bossy personality. Ayanna and LaRon separated shortly after Alexis went missing, with both moving away from the Milwaukee area entirely. The plot of the land where the pair lived is now vacant. Alexis's younger sister, Ariana, was born after she went missing. Despite having never met her older sister, Ayanna has ensured Ariana and the rest of the family keep Alexis in their thoughts by taking them to places where she used to play. Their home is also filled in reminders of the missing girl, including photos, her homework assignments, and a watercolor self-portrait. As a result of Alexis's disappearance, Ayanna has been a lot more protective of her children. She rarely lets them go out of her sight, making sure she is the one to drive them to and from school. So it seems like Ayanna has been really severely impacted by this, something that she doesn't have closure for and doesn't even have an answer to. She is now raising 2 other children and still holding out hope that her daughter is alive. And it's really such a tragic situation that even after at the end of all this, there's just not an answer that we can just know, just to get closure for the situation, because it just is unimaginably difficult to not know what happened to your child. It is just a terrible situation, and I really feel for Ayanna and her family, and I really do pray for Alexis's return, and I do hope she is alive. I really do, and I hope that we can get an answer to this someday. Anyway, I hope that you guys somewhat enjoyed this video, just because I really wanted to talk about this case, just because it really is unfair how the world works and how it views Black black children versus white children. And I thought with this case specifically, especially because of the time it happened around the whole Elizabeth Smart case and how the media just pounced on that story, that Alexis was kind of forgotten, and I don't want her to be forgotten. I don't want this case to be forgotten, and I want her to safely return. And if I can help somewhat in spreading information to people about this case so it isn't forgotten, I'm gonna do what I can, specifically because this case is important, not just because it's a missing child, but like I said, because it is a missing black child, and black children tend to be forgotten by the police, by the media, and we need to start making this right now. So if you do have a tip to submit to anybody concerning Alexis in this case, you can contact your local FBI office or your nearest American embassy or consulate, or you can call the Milwaukee Police, I'm assuming. They would definitely be the people to contact concerning her specifically. Anyway, I really hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you in the next video.